Go ahead, Allison, with any initial comments, and then we'll proceed.
Sounds good. I was just giving it a second for people to trickle in, but welcome everyone to Earth Day. My name is Allison Jenks, and I'm the Facility Sustainability Manager here at NMSU. And this is organized by SPOC, which Dean Reddy will talk about a little bit more. A little housekeeping. We have a series of presenters that are going to go back to back. The Q&A function is open at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions, please submit it there, and we can respond through the chat through there to continue the conversation. And there's a live transcript at the bottom. If you would like to turn that off, you can. You just click it and turn closed captioning off. And I think that's pretty much it. So I will turn it over to Dean Reddy to introduce everyone and give a warmer welcome.
Super. I don't think we should take any more time because we really don't have much time, and we have a competing event that people may go back and forth between the president's address at 3 o'clock. So we have about an hour and a half to accommodate 5 presentations. So each presentation will last about 15 minutes. My name is Lakshmi Reddy. I'm the Dean of the College of Engineering and a co-chair of the Sustainability Policy Oversight Council, SPOC, SPOC. The other co-chair being Rolando Flores, Dean of the College of ACES. So when we were thinking of inviting guests from outside, and we had one presentation from the outside, Michelle Greaves, that was an outstanding presentation on sustainability and biomimicry. We found out that we don't have to go too far out. We have enough inside talent at home. And sure enough, we found a very impressive slate of talks and presentations that I myself personally am wanting to hear from. So here we are with people from experts from 2 colleges, College of Engineering and the College of ACES, and in no particular order. Well, maybe I think this is the order of the presentations. Rajan Gimre, Peshu and Dr. Kandan, Philip King, and Dubois, Efren Delgado. So these are the faculty members from ACES and College of Engineering, coming from a number of different areas, although they're all allied, related to each other in the name of sustainability of the natural resources, be it water, be it deforestation, and so food waste. A number of themes are all very, very connected to the sustainability idea. So I will not take much time, but I think the audience knows who the speakers are, and the speakers know who each other does with research. So we're very thankful for the speakers. I am personally thankful because both Dean Flores and myself were so impressed when we were looking for a thematic structure for this symposium. We found out that we ourselves don't know much about our inside talent. So I'm not going to take any more time. So just one groundkeeping rule, please put your questions on chat. And if in fact I cannot relay that question appropriately, or if the authors don't see it, I'm going to call on the authors to see if they would like to address those questions. But in the interest of time, we'll go ahead with the first topic, and that will be given by Rajan Gimre.
Okay, thank you, Dean ready. Thank you, Allison, for inviting and organizing this event. So I will be talking about carbon sequestration for climate change solutions in arid and semi-arid regions. I am Assistant Professor of Cropping System at NMSU ACES. And I would like to thank, a special thanks to my research team, before going on the presentation, and also Carbon Sequestration ad hoc committee, because I will be starting some of the items from need for the carbon sequestration for climate change mitigation, our unique position for the solution, and then go into carbon sequestration and cropland systems, results, impacts, and then at the end, if we get time, we'll go on Q&A. So let's start with the need. This Paris Climate Agreement set the goal of limiting global warming below 2 degrees Celsius to avoid some of the unexpected consequences from climate changes. And how can we do that? There are multiple practices, like replacing fossil fuel with clean energy is one of the strategy. And another is just sequestering atmospheric carbon into our plant and soil or in the land. And how that is possible is through land use and management. This carbon sequestration is possible through different land management practices, and that is where we're gonna focus. And to go on to carbon sequestration, first we need to know what carbon sequestration actually is. It involves the process of capturing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it into either in plant, soil, or in some form of geological material. So basically capturing and storing carbon involves carbon sequestration. And then the goal of this capturing carbon is reducing global climate change or mitigating greenhouse effect associated with these gases. But when we talk about carbon sequestration in arid and semi-arid region, there are key impediments which limits our ability to sequester carbon. First is the lack of technologies that works for arid and semi-arid region, which is suitable for our agroecosystem. Then the second is absence of quantifiable and verifiable benefits. How much carbon sequestration can happen in arid or semi-arid region? And is that sequestered carbon permanent? Is that it stays in the soil or in your vegetation for enough long time? And lack of policy that provides economic incentive to our farmer, rancher, and landowner so that they are interested in this program. So these are the major barriers, working in arid and semi-arid region. But here in New Mexico State University, we are uniquely situated. In this map, you can look, these different colors. These are different climatic zones or subclimatic zones, different temperature regimes, different precipitation regime. And if you look at these stars, in different stars, this is where NMSU have research and extension research centers. So that we have almost like all climatic zone, all kind of all environments we represent in both arid and semi-arid regions. So that is our strength, that if we do some carbon sequestration related work across New Mexico, we can cover a lot of ground. And then these research centers cover our biggest rangeland system, forest system, urban, cropland, all 4 different kind of land uses and associated practices. And also, if we look at our ongoing research plus potential research topic that could benefit, this carbon sequestration practice could benefit. Now there are researchers already working on different aspects of cropland management, different aspects of rangeland management, forest management, and urban system. Only focus maybe not in the carbon sequestration, but these practices are already been in research. And we also look at the strength of our faculty. We have faculty in soil science, agronomy, to economics, food science. So all aspects of carbon sequestration and climate change mitigation research, we can do here at NMSU. And being a land grant university, that is another beauty. We have a research, extension, and education. So we can tackle not only research, but also education, extension, and in the policy and agricultural literacy program. So we thought, this is a really good opportunity. We can tackle all these aspects. And then we worked on a roadmap to establish the National Center on Carbon Management and Soil Health in arid and semi-arid environments here at NMSU. So last several months, we worked on this roadmap, how we can establish this center, and then how we can capitalize our human resource as well as land resource in New Mexico. And this is the roadmap, or this is the time frame we are talking. First 4 to 5 years, we will establish a solid baseline for carbon sequestration through research and demonstration projects in different NMSU facilities across New Mexico. And then also at the side by side, we develop education, outreach, and workforce development activities through graduate and undergraduate educations. And then the second step would be identify adaptable land management practice through research and demonstration. Through establishment of research plots and demonstration plots, we'll identify which practice really works for this arid and semi-arid region. And then also at the same time, implementing research, implementing education and outreach activities there. And starting 2025, we will have identified techniques that works for semi-arid region, arid region. Then we start implementing those practices with the aim of getting carbon neutral New Mexico, at least land use sector, by 2050. Then also develop workforce on due course of time. So this is the very brief overview of what we are thinking when we are talking about carbon sequestration, leading carbon sequestration, and New Mexico State University leading in carbon sequestration research, education, and extension activity. And now I would like to transition to carbon management and sequestration in cropland. Let's look at where we are in cropland sector. I'm not going to talk other sectors, but in the cropland, what we can do in carbon management, carbon sequestration is one key principle is minimizing soil disturbance. Minimizing disturbance through reduced tillage or no tillage practice that can reduce carbon loss, and also maximizing carbon input, because when we talk sequestration, there should be carbon input. Yes, one is minimizing loss, another is maximizing input through crop residue, nutrient management, application of different soil amendments. Then third is diversifying cropping through, again, cover cropping, crop rotation, mixed cropping, because when we provide a diverse kind of substrate, then the sequestration efficiency or microbial efficiency of carbon utilization and carbon transformation is increased. So diversifying cropping is another strategy for the cropland. And continuous ground cover. That is the fourth component or fourth principle of increasing carbon sequestration in cropland systems. Again, that is possible through, again, cover cropping, crop rotation, and perennial cropping. Instead of annual cropping and leaving land fallow, maintaining continuous living root through perennial cropping, that is another strategy. And now, when we have this, we talk about minimum tillage, we talk about increasing carbon input. Let's look at how it works in very brief. When plant litter, residue, animal waste enters into a soil, the decomposition process is initiated by microbial community. Similarly, in the below ground residues, dead plant materials goes through decomposition process, and it ultimately transforms into carbon dioxide. Part of that material goes into carbon dioxide. In that process, nutrient is released, which is required for plant growth and development, and also soil organic matter transformation or stabilization of organic matter. So this is, when we talk carbon sequestration, improving efficiency of organic matter storage and reducing CO2 emissions. Now that balance, we are working on that balance when we talk about carbon sequestration. But at the same time, the other processes also happening, like symbiotic nitrogen fixation, If you have higher carbon sequestration, it improves soil structure, which is related to increasing water holding capacity, water conservation, and that is directly related to water storage and erosion control. So this sequestration of carbon is associated with multiple ecosystem services. I'm just trying to give you an overview of the overview of like how this works. And then let's go into our research, carbon farming and soil health management practices in New Mexico. Like my research group is working on different tillage systems, like conventional tillage, reduced tillage, and no tillage practice, and with different crop residue management practices. And we also have another project on pasture cropping, where we are integrating annual crop with perennial native grasses, and then how that works in terms of carbon dynamics, and comparing that with our typical annual cropping system. Another project we are working is cover crops and cropping system diversification in grain and forage crop rotations. So that project also through diversifying carbon substrate, we are looking the mechanism of carbon sequestration happening in this system. And another form of perennial and annual crop integration is putting perennial grass in the form of buffer strip. You can see corn on this side, also corn on this side, then we have perennial grass. So it also provides multiple ecosystem service and also helps in carbon sequestration. So I'm just giving you a very brief overview of what we are working in our research. And if we look at some of the results of this research, for example, from this tillage and crop residue study or cover cropping study, what I find is this one is conventional tillage, with about 12 megagram carbon or 12 metric ton carbon in the conventional system. And when we follow strip tillage, strip tillage practice, after 4 years, it increased about 1.3 megagram carbon per hectare as compared to conventional tillage. If we look at no tillage practice, further less disturbance, 1.5 megagram. And then we follow strip tillage with cover cropping, then there is a further increase in soil carbon. And no tillage and cover cropping, that was most beneficial in terms of soil organic carbon storage. This data is from surface soil. And most of the carbon sequestration was happening in that top 6-inch soil or top 15 centimeter soil in this study. And another approach, I did not discuss, but having the livestock in New Mexico, if we talk, our rangeland is very extensive, and even in the cropland system, we integrate cattle with our cropping system. And in another study, we look at effect of that livestock grazing on soil carbon and carbon sequestration potential. And we find that we could see difference. These are three with this round, these 3 bars with a round top. These are a cropland system. And then this green one, this is with the livestock integration. And these 2 systems are without livestock integration, crop only system. There you can see more organic matter, organic carbon in livestock integrated system. In the grassland, when we look at overall profile of 80 centimeter, we did not see much difference. But in the surface, top 20 centimeter, you could see a higher amount of organic carbon with the grazing as compared to non-grazed, pasture or native grassland system. And the grassland, if we compare grassland with cropland system, restoring grass in your crop field would increase carbon sequestration. Here we see up to 37% more carbon in grassland as compared to cropland in top 20 centimeter. And about
Rajan, if you could
more.
wrap it up.
Okay, good. Yeah.
In the next minute.
Yes, and then grazing increase carbon also in the surface. And third approach, we look at compost effect, and then there you can see with increasing rate of compost, 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. Now you could see increase in carbon, especially root biomass with increasing compost input. So those are the different strategies we are looking here at New Mexico NMSU Science Center. And what I would like to emphasize as a summary is carbon sequestration is possible in arid and semi-arid environment. But the rate of sequestration is slow, and it is mostly dependent on precipitation and high temperature. But if we integrate more than one management practice, those effects are additive. So we can go gradually into either maximum potential to adoption of new techniques. We can maximize carbon sequestration. With that, I would like to thank. If I have some time, I will be happy to take some questions.
I think we should go ahead, move to the next presentation in the interest of time. Rajan, if you could still hang in there for questions from the panelists or the audience, you'll get them probably via chat room. So with that, can we go to the next presentation, which will be given by Dr. Shu and Dr. Kandan on water sustainability?
Okay, thank you very much, Dean Reddy, and also good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about some of the work that our group is working on in developing a sustainable wastewater infrastructure. And my name is Nirmala Kandan. I'm a professor in the Civil Engineering Department, and Professor Shu is a colleague of mine. And I also want to acknowledge the contribution to this work by two of my PhD students, Himali and Isru, and also many others over the last 10 years or so in developing this infrastructure that I want to talk about. Okay, so the topic was been indicated as water, and I'm going to talk about wastewater, and you probably are wondering what's the connection between sustainable water and wastewater infrastructure. I just want to make the connection here and to make the case for a sustainable wastewater infrastructure that can contribute to water sustainability. Now, this picture shows us the discharge from the Las Cruces wastewater treatment plant. If you are not familiar with what is going on here, here is the wastewater discharge falling into the Rio Grande here. When the Rio Grande is flowing, that's how it looks like. But the point I want to make here is that about 12 million gallons per day of wastewater is discharged, which has about 1,000 pounds of nitrogen and 100 pounds of phosphorus, which are valuable fertilizers that are discharged every day through this effluent into the Rio Grande. So please keep that in mind. Keep in mind that the city of Las Cruces is producing about 22 million gallons per day of potable water, drinking water, or drinking quality water. So if we can reclaim, or if we can reclaim water that is now being discharged into the Rio Grande, we can make up for about 50% of the water that the city of Las Cruces is trying to produce to support our city, right? In addition, we are going to recover some, if we can, recover the fertilizer value out of the discharge that can be of benefit to the agricultural sector. So by doing that, we can increase the sustainability of the wastewater infrastructure. Okay, so what's wastewater infrastructure classically has been designed, and it is essential to perform these functions, specifically to protect human health, to preserve the ecosystem, and also to promote the economic development. These were the main goals of the wastewater infrastructure traditionally. But now with shortage of water and also the limitation of natural resources, we are trying to recover high quality water from the wastewaters and also trying to recover resources from the wastewater for beneficial reuse. Some of the resources that we are focusing on are energy and fertilizers, nitrogen containing fertilizers and phosphorus containing fertilizers. Okay, so why we are developing this infrastructure is because the current wastewater infrastructure is energy intensive and it dissipates the resources that are in the wastewater as waste products, and also the current infrastructure contributes to significant greenhouse gas emissions. And there are some other disadvantages also, but these are the main ones. So because of this, it has been found recently that the current system, which is an obsolete system developed about 100 years ago, is no more sustainable. It's not only my point of view, but also has been recognized by the US EPA, the American Society of Civil Engineers, the European Economic Agency, and the UN Water, and several other researchers, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that gave us, provided the motivation for us to develop an alternate or a new wastewater infrastructure system. So when we are trying to develop a sustainable system, we were looking around to see how we can quantify sustainability. People talk about sustainable systems and sustainability in a kind of a loose sense without any quantitative measures. So we decided to adopt the procedure taken by the United Nations, where they, in the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, they came up with, or they proposed 17 goals for sustainable development that are kind of tied to about 169 targets that we are supposed to meet by 2030. And this agenda was agreed upon by all the UN members, all the 193 UN members, right? So we are trying to, our goal here in this project, part of this project, was to distill these 17 SDGs and the 169 targets into techno-economic metrics that we can use to evaluate the sustainability of wastewater infrastructure, not only to ascertain or not only to quantify the benefits of our system, but also to quantify the benefits or the sustainability of existing systems so that we can make some comparisons. Okay, so here are the 17 sustainable development goals. And when we looked at them carefully, turns out that all of them or most of them are directly or indirectly connected to the goal number 6, which is providing clean water and sanitation. So there are direct linkages between the 17 goals and this goal number 6, which is focusing primarily on clean water and sanitation. So in 2018, UN Water undertook a study to assess how the various countries were progressing towards meeting the 2030 agenda goals of the 17 measures. And they came up with the conclusion that at the current rate of development, the world is not on target not going to meet SDG 6. That means we are we are going to run into some problems in terms of meeting the goals, specifically relating to SDG 6. This is because the current technologies are not capable, and also some of them, many countries, it may not be economically feasible to deploy the current technologies. Okay, so with that, I want to kind of give you a brief introduction to the algal system that we have been developing at NMSU. We call it the algal wastewater treatment system as opposed to the conventional treatment system. And it is basically an enclosed reactor in which we cultivate algae and do some operation of the system. And I don't want to talk too much into detail about that, except to say that a lot of students worked on this project, taking this idea from the lab to bench scale and pilot scale, and eventually in collaboration with the city of Las Cruces, we developed a field scale prototype system at pilot scale, and it was deployed here, as you can see here, at the treatment plant. And we have been operating this for about last 5 years under various scenarios and situations. And we have demonstrated that the algal system that we have developed has several benefits over the conventional system. We compared the algal system, our algal system, side by side with the conventional system, and showed that this system has several benefits, such as single-step removal of all the pollutants, potential for recovering biofuel, liquid biofuel, the potential for recovering fertilizers, the potential for reducing pathogens and viruses, antibiotic-resistant genes, etc., and minimal loss of water by evaporation, volatilization, etc., and also minimum use of disinfection agents, which can result in disinfection byproducts and so on and so forth. So all these have been demonstrated, documented, and published in papers, in dissertations and theses over the last 10 years. Okay. And in this context, I want to kind of point out that we have also shown that these benefits are directly and indirectly tied to many of the SDGs, most of the SDGs, except 2 of them. All of them are directly or indirectly connected to these benefits. Okay, so with that idea, with this information, our next step was to quantify how these connections can translate to economic metrics, okay, so that we can create a sustainable wastewater infrastructure. So selecting, for example, these typical SDGs, and here is the SDG 11, which relates to sustainable cities and communities of the future. We distilled all these SDGs and their targets into 5 attributes that can define a sustainable wastewater infrastructure, and came up with quantitative metrics that we can measure or calculate from field data of wastewater treatment plants. So with those metrics, we came up with about 36 metrics. We used a technique called multi-criteria decision-making approach to rank the algal wastewater system against various current technologies based on environmental, economic, and societal sustainability measures derived from the SDGs. So here are the various 17 SDGs, and we use those metrics that we developed to compare these technologies. These are the current technologies that are out there, and this is the NMSU technology that we are been developing. So based on that, we can quantify numerically the environmental sustainability, the economic sustainability, and the societal sustainability. Those are the three pillars of sustainability. And then we can come up with a measure of overall sustainability. And to make the long story short, from this diagram, it becomes clear that the algal system is more sustainable than the current technologies that are out there. Okay, so that's basically what I just wanted to present today, and just wanted to mention that the ideas that we talked about SDGs have been presented in papers in 3 journal articles, and I just want to acknowledge the support by the National Science Foundation and the Engineering Research Center for Reinventing the Nation's Urban Water Infrastructure, the City of Las Cruces Utilities Division, and the College of Engineering in supporting the students involved in these projects. Okay, and I'll be happy to take any questions now, or if you can send them through the chat box, I can try to answer them. Thank you.
I think it would be nice, Dr. Kandan, to proceed with the next presentations and expect the questions on the chat.
Thank you. Yes, okay.
The next presentation is Dr. Philip King on the water supply resilience in changing climate.
Okay, thank you, Dean Reddy. Always make sure you're not on mute. Okay, what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon here is a little different from sustainability. As you will see, sustainability requires a bit more optimism than resilience. But in talking about about what we can do to be more resilient with our water supply, let me just point out that right now, the city of Las Cruces, New Mexico State University, most of the all of the municipalities in southern New Mexico rely entirely on groundwater for their water supply, 100%. The only users of surface water in southern New Mexico are the irrigators within Elephant Butte Irrigation District. The problem is that the surface water and the groundwater are very closely connected, so you cannot be resilient in one without maintaining resilience in another. Same in the other. Same with sustainability. Well, Kandan gave you a description of, or a definition, if you will, of sustainability. Let me give you a very non-technical definition of resilience, which is capable of withstanding shock without permanent deformation or rupture, or tending to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune. And misfortune, when it comes to water, of course, is things like drought and climate change, which are not the same thing. The big question, though, is do you really want to hear from a Lower Rio Grande guy about resilient water management practice? Because we do not have resilient water management practice down here right now. However, we have seen shock, we have seen misfortune and change, and we're adapting because things are getting bad enough. If you come away with this with a sense of urgency, then I will have succeeded. It is not my intention to induce panic, because panic is very counterproductive, but urgency is very much on the menu. So we've got several challenges facing the Lower Rio Grande, and the Lower Rio Grande is basically from Elephant Butte Reservoir south to the Texas state line. It is certainly in the midst of multi-decadal drought that came to roost in this area in about 1999, 2000, depending on how you categorize things. So in late 90s into early 2000. We also are facing an increasingly arid climate, and unlike drought, this shift to a more arid climate is not cyclical. It appears to be permanent unless some of these measures to mitigate climate change can get put into effect and minimize the damage to the climate. What I'm going to focus on is adapting to what is appearing to be an inevitable shift towards a more arid climate. Now we're the lower Rio Grande. We are south of Colorado. We're downstream of upstate New Mexico, the Albuquerque region. So we're sort of the bottom end of the river. And this is not that river that flows out at Brownsville, Texas. This is the river that dies in the desert southeast of El Paso. Unfortunately, we have laws that hand out the water in quantities that are determined for the maximum use by a user. So if I'm an irrigator or a municipality, I get my water rights based on the most I used in any year. Well, the best years have a whole lot more water than the worst years, so this does not address the issue of shortage very well. The intention of this system of water rights is not that it establishes resiliency or sustainability, but rather it tells the state of New Mexico what order they have to go cut off water users. So if we run short, just go tell a water user, you're not using water this year. That's a pretty tough message to convey. Municipal and industrial water use is increasing in the area, and agriculture has gotten a lot more efficient in the past decades, so that more of the water is going into production of the crop and is depleted from the local hydrologic system. So what we're looking at is the need to reduce our depletions to try to establish some sort of a hydrologic balance in this more arid climate. The water rights were handed out in the wettest years, but we are now living in the driest years. So those water rights, there's more paper water, more water rights that have been handed out than there is physical water for people to exercise those. So we find ourselves in this vicious circle. First of all, when our surface water supply, it runs short, what people do is they pump more groundwater to offset the impact of the short surface water supply. So you're drawing on the groundwater, plus the recharge to the groundwater, the replacement water that goes into the aquifers comes from the surface water system, which is reduced. So you've got reduced recharge and increased draw on the aquifer. This is a very unhealthy thing to try to balance. If you do impair that groundwater system by, you draw down your groundwater system, you're going to have more surface water loss. So you'll have less surface water. What do we do when we have less surface water? We go and we pump more, so it just cycles like this. Reduced surface water leads to increased groundwater use and reduced recharge, which leads to surface water loss, which leads to more pumping, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. Now, this is a little hydrologic history of the surface water system. And one really good indicator of where we are in our hydrologic status, if you will, in the lower Rio Grande, is what is in Elephant Butte Reservoir. So the blue line you see here is storage in Elephant Butte. And the red line is the annual release from Elephant Butte for use by the farmers down here in EBID, in the El Paso Irrigation District, and in the country of Mexico. Well, they all get a piece of the water here. Now, the blue line you see again is storage in reservoir. That's how much water is sitting in the reservoir at any point. And the red line is the annual release, the amount of water that we release from Elephant Butte Reservoir during the year. So you see that this breaks up into four very distinct ages or eras that we've been through. First of all, in the early years of the Rio Grande project, right after Elephant Butte went online in 1916, we had a plentiful supply. If you were above about 600,000 acre feet on your annual release, you've basically got enough water to do what you want. So that was everything from 1916 up to 1951. Then in 1951, we went into this recurring drought where we had some very short water years here, dipping even below 200,000 acre feet released from Elephant Butte Reservoir. If you're below 400,000 acre feet of release, you're really hurting. Above 600, you're okay. Below 400, you're really hurting. Then we went into the 80s and 90s, and this is where we sort of established our current appetites for water, planting high water use crops like the pecans you see behind me. And we had from 79 to 2002, we had 24 years where we had a full supply of surface water every year. Then you see in the late 90s, the reservoir storage starts to plummet. That's basically the beginning of the current drought that we're in. And we've been in it. We've had reduced surface water supplies every year since 2002. Just a little current event here. We are now looking at running Elephant Butte Reservoir this current water year down to about 10,000 acre feet. And the reason we're not going any lower than 10,000 acre feet is that if you empty the reservoir, you kill a whole bunch of fish, and we're trying to avoid a fish kill. That will be about 0.5% capacity, which says we're in pretty bad shape. This is the water that's flowing into Elephant Butte Reservoir from the north. This is the Rio Grande coming into the reservoir, measured at San Marcial. And what I'm looking at here is 2018, 2019, 2020, and so far in 2021. You see, 2018, that was a pretty bad snowpack year. So we basically didn't get any spring runoff, which is March through July inflow into the reservoir. And that comes from snowmelt in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. Bad snowfall year, bad runoff. Makes perfectly good sense. 2019 was a really good year, and that's what a spring runoff looks like. You get this big surge of water coming in as the snow in the San Luis Valley and the San Juans and the Sangre de Cristos melts and runs into the reservoir. We had a great year in 2019. Then in 2020, and this is interesting, that was a roughly average snowpack year, and we still didn't have any runoff, just like 2018. 2021, the red line you see here up to the present, it's looking like another collapsed year of spring runoff. We're basically not getting any spring runoff this year. And that's getting to be an all too familiar pattern. Dr. Dubois will be talking a little bit later about some of the driving causes, so I won't belabor that. But down here, we do have potential for a great deal of resiliency because this is a cross section across the Mesilla Valley. And what we have here is this little narrow yellow layer you see here is the river alluvium. That's the shallow aquifer that is in immediate contact with the river. The river is that little notch you see right there. It overlays these formations that were laid down by ancestral Rio Grande over the millennia, so that in places we've got 2,000 feet of saturated aquifer below us. That's a lot of water. But most of the action takes place in the shallow alluvium and the upper, this is called the upper Santa Fe, pumping groundwater out. But as you pump groundwater out, it creates a void in the aquifer, which is refilled from the river. To simplify this a little bit, let me draw a cartoon for you. Take this to be a cross section across the Mesilla Valley again. And what we have is we have our surface water supply, and this is the only basically the only renewable water in the system. We divert that into our canal system, and before we deliver any of that water to any farmers, we get seepage. Most of we've got about 300 miles of canals in the project. Only about 10% of those have lining, so there is a lot of seepage that occurs. In fact, right now, that is the largest source, or that is one of the largest sources of recharge to the aquifer in the whole system. We then deliver it to the farms where they irrigate. The crop water use, it takes it out of the soil and basically puts it into the atmosphere where it's lost to the local hydrologic system. What the crop doesn't use drains through the subsurface into our drains, which return to the river where it is available for use by downstream users. Now, if this is all we had to use, we would be in trouble, but we do sit on this big aquifer. And so what farmers did in the 50s is, in response to that drought you saw, that first period of drought, they installed wells. They pump water out, which gets them through the period of short surface water supply. However, what it's doing is capturing water that would otherwise have returned to the river and been available for downstream. So what you're really doing is borrowing water against future surface water supplies. You can see it in the groundwater. This is from 1945 up to about 2015. You can see the effect of drought on the groundwater. In our current drought, we plunged deeper than we did any time in the 50s and expect that we will go deeper. So what's happening here is we're surviving through this period of short surface water supply by pumping groundwater, which again enters that whole positive feedback loop. What we really need to do is to get a more resilient water supply so that we can adapt to these wild swings that we see in water supply. Right now, it's too much of business as usual, regardless of what the surface water supply is doing. In order to develop a more resilient water management, we need groundwater management, certainly. Right now, there isn't a whole lot of groundwater management going on here. Actually responding to short water supply conditions. So what I see happening is using offsets, basically fallowing agricultural grounds during times of severe shortage, so that there is more surface water supply, which leads to more groundwater recharge, just a healthier system. We also need reductions in municipal and industrial use. The city of Las Cruces has done a whole lot to reduce their per capita water use, but there is also growth going on. So we're going to be looking at we're going to need to look at reducing the municipal and industrial supply, and possibly even reduce farm delivery. Not necessarily on a single farm. What we want to do is, instead of reducing the delivery to all of our irrigated lands, we want to reduce our irrigated lands and fully irrigate them. And we need to develop the institutional infrastructure to do that. But what Condon talked about was a lot of other things that we are not doing. For example, we are not importing water. One of the reasons for that is that everybody else around us is just as short of water as we are. Desalination. This is an area where Dr. Shu and I are doing some work to assess the feasibility of a large brackish groundwater desalination plant down in Santa Teresa. So instead of taking fresh water out of agriculture for municipal and industrial use, we're looking at using brackish water that nobody else is using. It's just sitting there. Apply a little treatment to it and send it on its way. Surface water treatment for M&I use. El Paso has been doing this since the 1940s. If you use surface water, it means you use less groundwater. That's a good thing. In that case, in order to feed a surface water treatment plant, the municipal and industrial providers would have to buy and dry, that is, permanently eliminate agricultural land. Over here, we've got rotational fallowing, which you sort of do it strategically in response to water supply. But this is a permanent retirement. You're taking land out of production. I'm an agricultural engineer. I work as a consultant for Elephant Butte Irrigation District. And I'm telling you that climate change is going to drive a reduction in irrigated agriculture in the lower Rio Grande. There's no two ways about it. Flood capture, where we capture flood water that would otherwise flush down the system, capture it and either use it to recharge our aquifer or to directly use it. So there's a lot of things we can do rather than just go drill a hole and pump more groundwater, which is basically what we do now. It's a long topic and I'm trying to get through this as quick as I can before the dean kicks me out. So let me just say that this depletion reduction is a very difficult thing because we've got an economy in this area built on wetter times that counts on the ability to deplete water at a rate that they did during those wetter times. We've talked about lower water use crops. Well, that's an economic decision made by the farmers. They don't grow pecans because they don't use much water. They use a lot of water. They grow pecans because they make money. And if a crop doesn't make money, there's really no incentive to grow it. Deficit irrigation, I don't think is going to get us a lot of ground either. You can produce more effectively by fully irrigating a reduced area, that is intensive irrigation, rather than deficit irrigating a larger area, which is extensive irrigation. We're going to have to look at fallowing. There's just no way about it. That's a reduction in acreage, both on a permanent basis and on a rotational basis in response to conditions. One of the things that we've got to be very careful of is that if we go overboard with the fallowing, that might be good for the aquifer, but people don't move to Las Cruces where people move to Las Cruces because they like living in an agricultural community. If they didn't, they would go move to Phoenix. So we are hoping that we can do this in a constructive way that allows us to maintain an agricultural economy in this area, but develop more resiliency for our system. And with that, I will ask if there are any questions or if you'd like to move on.
There aren't any questions coming through, and in interest of time, I think we should move on to the
Okay.
next one. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Dr. King.
I'm really sorry to the speakers. The talks are just so thought-provoking. I myself have a number of questions, but it looks like we squeezed a lot of presentations. So we will go ahead with the next presentation, which will be on food waste by Efren Delgado.
Thank you very much. Team ready? Can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm not able to turn, okay, yeah, now I can. Thank you very much, Team Ready, as I said, and we're going to hear about food waste, how we can utilize food waste as a source of bioactive compounds to produce new foods and functional foods, and also feed for the aquaculture industry. The latest data of the United States Environmental Protection Agency shows us there are around 292 million tons of waste are produced in 2018, and that waste production has been increasing throughout the years and throughout the decades. So if we look closer to what type of what do we do with that waste? Well, we have a strong recycle efforts. Around 24% of that waste can be recycled. Around 9% can be composted, so we can regularly use again that waste, or we can use it as energy. And we know there's a lot of research going into production of energy based on waste. But we still have around 50% of waste that goes into the landfill. Now, if we get closer to what are those 292 million tons made of, well, we have paper and cardboard, 23%, which we know, as we saw in the previous slide, could be recycled. We have glass, metals, plastic, rubber, but we have a high amount of yard trimmings and food that together makes more than 30% of the waste. And the interesting thing is that not many research has been done on how we can utilize these residues. Instead of bringing it into the landfill, how can we obtain food out of that and use it as a functional food, recover those nutrients that are still in those trimmings and in that waste food. And so the food industry has new challenges. The traditional, we know, produce high nutritional food to for the growing population. That's how we've done it traditionally, and it's necessary. But we're looking more into a circular economy, a sustainable bioeconomy, where we need to use out of the raw material we cannot waste more raw material. From every pound of raw material, we need to extract as much as possible of nutrients and produce food products. And then we have the waste that we just saw. It's a huge amount of waste that we have. And the food industry has the big challenge, how to use that waste to produce new food products. We're gonna see also in the future an increasing use of insects as a traditional substitute for animal proteins if we wanna feed the growing industry. But of course, the food industry uses a lot of water, resources and energy, and that's also one of the big challenges that the food industry has. So what we put together here at NMSU, an interdisciplinary group from different colleges, College of Engineering, ACES, and different departments, and economics with different business and economics, with different perspective and interdisciplinary. We are aware that throughout the supply chain, from farm going to transport, storage, process, packaging, distribution, retail, consumer, and a landfill, we have a strong waste of food, strong waste of energy and water. So how do we want to tackle this? We need to analyze it from the economic point of view, regulation, working with the state, federal, to improve federal regulations. Technology is an important point or aspect also that we need to tackle this problem and these challenges that the food industry is facing: engineering, traceability, food safety aspects, but also workforce, from the point of view of workforce. And we saw at this time with the pandemic, how to make that workforce sustainable to make sure that food production can continue, recycling and renewable energy. With that point of view, I'm going to show you today 2 examples of how we can utilize agro-industrial byproducts, residues, or waste to produce food products or aquaculture products instead of putting it into the landfill or composting. The first example I want to present is related to cotton and white cotton. We have right now a cotton seed, a cotton variety that doesn't have a traditional anti-nutritional factor, which is gossypol. This plant doesn't, and this type of plant, glandless cotton seeds, doesn't contain that nutritional anti-nutritional factor. And just to mention an anti-nutritional factor, are chemical compounds that for human beings, for example, or other monogastrics, they do not allow digestion. So a lot of the nutrients are lost. With the glandless cotton seed protein, we don't have that problem, but we do have a residue. When we take the oil out of those seeds, we have a high amount of waste that could be composted, or can go to the landfill. But if you look into this waste, we have 55%. So over half of that byproduct of their waste is protein. So that's why we started working with this waste. This is just the structure of gossypol, if you're interested. It has two aldehyde groups that interact with protein, and that's why we cannot digest it. So what we extracted that protein from the residue, and extracting it, we found 30% of the amino acids are essential in cottonseed meal. If we compare it with soy protein, it's only 17%. So we have a high concentration of essential amino acids, and we have a high concentration of hydrophobic amino acid. And remember, essential amino acids are those that the human body doesn't synthesize and are necessary for a lot of the biological process in human. So we need to consume it from another source of nutrients. Characterize the protein, as you can see, and we found 3 proteins that are really important for us, because those proteins can be used based on the hydrophobicity, can be used in the food industry to stabilize food products. So we concentrated on those 3 proteins. And we found the functional properties that the protein from cotton can have a high foaming capacity. That's the one that has foam, and we can use it to stabilize cakes and at certain pH. We also found that that cottonseed meal has the same gelation capacity as soy protein, which allow us to use that protein, for example, for a tofu type of product, and we're looking into using it and develop that type of products too. And remember, this is from a waste product. What is also interesting is that the protein has a really high emulsifying capacity. That capacity we see into using this protein in the future as a stabilizer in food products that can help to use it instead of other chemical substances. So here, a natural emulsifying protein. Another aspect that we're looking to, well, we see that high water, the holding capacity were low, but the oil holding capacity, and we explained that in our research. Now, how can we apply this? Once we isolated those protein with high emulsifying activity, we can put it into yeast cells. We were able, thanks to the support from our postdoc, Patricia Cabrales, she was able to express that protein in yeast cells. We also developed with this new protein, we developed food products with a high protein content. It's a snack, but instead of being a junk food, now we have a snack that you can be sure you're getting about 20% of protein. And we developed a feed product for the aquaculture industry. This is how we developed the snack that I was talking about, using hominy and or nixtamal and an extruder. It's expanded protein, and at the end, our cottonseed extrude had 13% protein compared to 7% of a commercial snack, and our fat content was significantly lower. This is a different diet that we have, and thanks to the technology that we developed, we were able to develop a aqua feed product with metabolized energy, digestible energy, and in vitro energy comparable to the best commercial aquaculture feed, not in the United States, but in the whole world. The most commercial product, we were able to develop our feed with no fish meal. It contains up to 44% of glandless cottonseed meal. And if you can see in our in vivo studies, we also have the same growth compared to the controlled diet out in the market. We have also used other resources, other waste. For example, sugarcane bagasse, which is the waste after the extraction of sugar out of the sugarcane. We used that and have obtained the bioactive compounds, the phenolic compounds that are good as antioxidants. We were able to microencapsulate those. Those results have been already published, and now we're using those microcapsules that protect the antioxidants to put it in food products such as bread or tortilla products, or even restricted meat products. We have also used residues from the bean industry that don't have a commercial product. We can use them, extract the proteins, or use it as a base for aquaculture feed or for extruded snacks with a high protein content. So as you see, waste has a high potential and a lot of nutrients and bioactive compounds that we can still research, extract, and we can use them as an alternative to develop new functional foods, new products for human consumption, or for aquaculture feed or other areas in the animal nutrition. And the last, I know we're running out of time. I also wanna, that all this research is not possible without funding. So I wanna identify USDA NIFA for the supports, also Cotton Incorporated, and the team also students, our grad students that participate and produce a lot of this data. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Efren. We'll go to the last presentation, last but not the least, Dr. Dubois on Heat Island.
All right. Well, almost at the end of the presentations, but I will talk about the urban heat island that we did a project to measure that in Las Cruces. So first thing is, like, what is a urban heat island? Well, it's basically as we build up our urban areas, we modified the surface. So we put roads in, we put concrete paths, we put parking lots, buildings, and just kind of visualize in your mind the difference between the desert areas and then Las Cruces. And then if you were to take measurements at each location over time, specifically in the summertime, you'll find a starking difference between the highs and lows, particularly even the highs in the middle of the summer compared to the surrounding areas. So we call it an island because we kind of build up our urban areas around an area. So our project here, we wanted to map it out. And why do we care about the urban heat island? Well, this is data from 1990 to 2019, and it's surprisingly, heat actually leads the nation for the number of weather fatalities. Remember, this is just fatalities based off of the weather. This is based off the 30-year average. The annual number of people dying is even higher than floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, lightning, winter weather. So it's something we need to address. And a lot of us are working on this issue. And so what we, over the past several decades, we've figured out there is an urban heat island, and we've been measuring it. And so in some places, it's a few areas we've taken measurements, not here in Las Cruces, but other places, it can be up to 20 degrees Fahrenheit warmer because of the urban heat island. So it's a significant problem when especially if on top of that, you think of your high temperature, and then you got this other 20 degrees, and it doesn't have to be as that much, but it can be between 5 and 10, 15, 20 in certain areas. And so just think about the hottest day of the year, and some areas could even be hotter. So that's what we're working on to mitigate that. So we built this area up. So now we want to be able to find out where they are, and so that we can address that. So that's where we are in the project. So we came up with a measurement campaign to actually do that. And so we partnered with several organizations, and in the the funding came from NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's part of the Department of Commerce. And as part of NOAA, they have this National Integrated Heat Health Information System as part of the Climate Program Office. And then they have a subcontract with this organization called CAPA, and they came up with this heat watch. And they've been doing these urban heat island mapping projects for a few years. And we applied, we meaning the city of Las Cruces and NMSU. And so we got, as well as city of El Paso, and they teamed with UTEP. So last summer, we worked as a team between the city of El Paso and the city of Las Cruces to map out the urban heat island in each of our cities. And so I'm just going to present on Las Cruces. And so here's all the different locations across the country, but the blue circles are the ones who did it last summer. And this coming summer, city of Albuquerque will be doing their mapping campaign. So that'll be interesting to see. And so there's in kind of a broad spectrum all the way in the Northeast and the Pacific Northwest. And actually ours was probably the hottest temperatures out of all of those in our area. So what did we do? So we picked the day, we forecasted, and I'll show you a little bit about the environment. And we involved volunteers. There was basically no funding for the project. We did this as a citizen science project. And we enlisted 11 volunteers from here in Las Cruces. And we basically did, we attached a temperature and humidity sensor to cars and bicycles. And we had the volunteers drive their cars, and a couple brave bicyclists do routes around the area. And we did 3 different times of the day. And this was just one day. So just a snapshot of our summer this last year. A morning one, an early afternoon, and then a late afternoon evening one to compare how different are they. And as a result, after we collected all of our data, basically the sensors collected a temperature and humidity measurement every second. We got 38,000 measurements, and our bottom line, our heat index, our maximum heat index was 112 degrees Fahrenheit. And so we partnered with the Green Chamber, as well as Lisa LaRock, who works at the city of Las Cruces, the sustainability manager, and putting all this together. So let me tell you about the project here. So this is the map. These are all the little lines in this map are the routes taken by the different teams. And we had 6 different zones, and team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were all car zones. And those basically had a sensor attached to the window. It was about 2 meters off the ground. And then team 6, those were 2 bicyclists. Team 6A was an individual, and team 6B was another individual who bicycled that part of town and over on the southeast part of town here. So and then we did these 3 times a day on one day. So after this, we put these into a GIS and created some surfaces in maps. So that was the goal of this output of this project. So in terms of what kind of environment did we're looking at? So we were trying to find like the hottest day of the year. And so this was just a screenshot from my browser from the day that we actually took measurements. And so we were out there on July 10th. This was our forecast for the day, and it was forecasting a high of 107 and hot. And it's just like we are in Las Cruces in the summer, slight chance of thunderstorms, but only 10% chance. So we were picking that day, and look at the rest of the week was a high of 107. So this was a prime time for picking the heat stress and mapping out heat across Las Cruces. And so on this day, this was that high temperatures that were measured across Las Cruces on that day. So the airport had a 108. Our station on campus had a 106. Even in the farm areas, we were in the hundreds, 103, 104 at Leyendecker, Science Center. So all the way across Las Cruces, it was 100. And even in some of the higher elevations out, we're near 100 over in San Andreas Mountains. So pretty warm that day. And so this was kind of our climatological time of year where we get some of our highest temperatures. And as a matter of fact, all the blues are the individual days of temperature. So the top of the bar is the high, bottom of the blue bar is the low. And this is a snapshot of all of July. And then so that area that's highlighted in red is kind of our window that we were doing, going to take measurements. And we picked July 10th as our observation time, which was this day right here. So just kind of a summary of last summer, we had 42 days over 100, and that's actually a record. Our average number of days over 100 is 12. So we were well over that. And as part of that, we had 16 consecutive days that were at least 100. And that was another record set. So this was a really good time to take a measurement study here. So this is kind of a couple of pictures of some of our volunteers. This is the sensor. We basically attach it to your window, and the sensor is up top. You drive your car around maximum speed about 30, 35 miles an hour. And then the data hit a little data logger inside this little white box, and you just drive around, and it has a GPS, and everything is tagged with a time and GPS signal, so we can map out. And then this is a bicyclist who had it on his handlebars here. So this is how we collected our data, just driving around 3 times a day. And so this is the outcome of the project. So this is the morning map from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. It took about an hour to drive these routes. And remember, this is all of 5 different routes. I didn't include the bike routes because they were a little bit different in terms of the height above the ground. But for the morning, our heat index ranged from 73 to 80 degrees. There were some significant hot spots near some of the intersections. So kind of pick an area where you're familiar with. You can see the intersection, both of Loman and the interstate. Kind of where you imagine where all the large concrete structures are, lots of parking lots, very high temperatures. And you can see the areas where there's the open space kind of on the northwest side. Cooler areas has more vegetation, more agricultural use, cooler temperatures. So this is the morning, so 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. And later in the day, so this is the second one, 3 to 4 p.m., our heat index ranged from 98 to 111. And we saw the significant heat throughout the town, except for the higher elevations up on Highway 70, up as you go elevation up by Oregon. But we're focusing in on the areas in Las Cruces. So what areas, what neighborhoods were getting the hottest temperatures, so that's kind of where we're focusing on the study, and as well as some of the areas where there's bus stops, places where they're outdoors, ballparks, things like that. Those are the areas where we're focusing in. And so this is just a map just showing you where they are. And in the afternoon, the late afternoon, evening, 7 to 8 p.m., the heat index ranged from 88 to 100 degrees. And the heat remained pretty much for most of the day. And the cool area popped up again on the northeast part of town. This is, if you know this area, I mean, there's agriculture in this area, cooling effect, but the areas where there's lots of housing, streets, those remain warm, as well as a few other areas that were kind of surprising by the Las Cruces Dam in that area. So a lot of it created a lot of questions that we haven't answered, but there's a lot of information that we did glean from this study that we're using. We'll talk a minute about that. We also, as part of that, we augmented it with some infrared camera survey, and basically just a simple infrared camera just to look at the surfaces. So this is not the air temperatures, but this is the temperatures of the surfaces. So I just drove around and looked for areas that had a sharp contrast. So areas that had shading versus warm, and just kind of looked at the temperatures of the sidewalks and parking lots, and then things like irrigated lawns and grass areas large trees, and just to kind of get an example of the variety of places where you could get cooling, and to kind of give a comparison between the air temperatures and the surfaces. And so this is actually on. I included the campus ones because those are very familiar to probably some of the folks who are on listening. This is Skene Hall, just looking at the variability of the temperatures, ranges from just over 100 to 153 degrees Fahrenheit in the surfaces. So it kind of gives us a kind of a variety of heating, just thinking about animals as we walk our animals on the streets, it's 150 degrees, so where are the areas where it's relief? So those are the kind of social issues that we're working on as we see the temperatures climb more and more in Las Cruces. We're working with the City of Las Cruces Sustainability Office, as well as NMSU and members of the community, to kind of, how do we use this data to understand that the social urban heat if impacts on social vulnerabilities. And so then it comes down to, so how do we mitigate it? So how do we influence urban planning outreach to the folks who are the most at risk? People who have health problems, athletic events, outdoor workers, homeless. So it gives us a sense of the risk level. So we got numbers, and I'd like to, if there's any folks interested who are on this event that are interested in collaborating, let me know. There's a lot of work that can be done. The City of Las Cruces has done a couple of small projects. We've got a few proposals in the works. Hopefully they'll get funded to actually address some of these with some funding, so with some pilot studies, and to test some ideas out across the campus, not campus, but the across the town. And so, and this is sort of a kind of a in the works type of project, but we have some data preliminary, and we're kind of working through. So how do we manage this? Because we're seeing the temperatures climb. Over time, we've seen a increase in the highs, and as time goes on, that the probability of higher highs becomes more increased as we go on, and it doesn't get as cold in the mornings anymore, so we don't get as much relief from the cool in the morning. So we're seeing that whole distribution of temperatures moving to a warmer state. So that's kind of the issues we're working on, having available, cooling areas, borrowing fans, all those different things are some of the mitigating things that we would like to work on. So here's my contact information. Get in touch with me if you're interested in collaborating. We can talk about it. I mean, remember that whole study that we just did was all citizen science. We don't have to have any funding to do this. It helps, but we need to be able to influence policy and things that are going on around our own homes. So I'll stop there, and we can probably take some questions later on.
Thank you. This is Lakshmi Reddy again, and I know we have reached the end of the time slot given to us. And I'm, again, very apologetic that we couldn't entertain any questions from each other or from the general audience. But one thing that I know for sure, I personally gained quite a bit here, in that there is so much connection, it looks like, between all your talks and the sustainability theme. Dr. Flores, Dean of ACES, unfortunately is not here, but we are planning on quite a few initiatives surrounding this theme campus-wide. And so stay tuned. And I think there's plenty of more opportunities like this, even outside the Earth Day context, for us to exchange the information and get into other fun things. So now we know who you are and what you do. And so you cannot escape from some of those new initiatives that we are dreaming about. So with that, I want to thank you all again. And thank you, Allison, for putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for presenting and coming, and the SPOC team for helping organize it, and Frank again for being the back end and working out all the technical stuff, and all the presenters and everyone. But yeah, stay tuned for all the good sustainability work happening on campus from all of our presenters and the SPOC team and the sustainability office. So happy Earth Day and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.